Alrighty, so for you guys, obviously, this is a really weird situation for high school students, but we're going to be doing distance learning, right? So I know a lot of you guys really can't get Blender up and running on, or sorry, Maya and Mudbox up and running on your computers. It's just Maya is one of those things that it's several gigabyte download. You have to create the account with Autodesk, and because of certain features that it has, it just doesn't really run on lower end computers. It already sounds like a couple of you guys have been actually to get Blender to work on your computers that you couldn't get Maya and Mudbox to run on. And I've even, as I said before, and you saw kind of in the announcements that we've been doing through Microsoft Teams, that Blender actually can work even on like a Surface Pro, right? So it should be able to work on the devices that Lathrop and BTEC give you. So it really is looking like all of you guys should be able to get Blender working on something, either your like Surface Pros or the devices. If you have a lower end computer at home that you have access to, it should be able to work on that. So I really feel like Blender is actually going to work well for us to actually do the class as normal. So we will be switching to Blender for the last project. Obviously, I know Maya and Mudbox a bit, more, better, but I've gotten pretty solid at Blender, so we'll be able to do it. We'll probably scale back the project a little bit, but I still want to try to cover all the fundamentals that we were going to cover with this, right? We're still going to build our troll. But we're going to do it in Blender this time, right? And see, I've got Blender up and running. And the nice thing is you probably saw a screenshot that I posted of the Blender portable, right? So when you guys go to blender.org to download it, you'll see that there's kind of an option for Windows, but if you click on that little pull down, there'll be Windows Portable. And what that does is it allows you to download a zip file of Blender. And what you can do is you can extract that into its own folder. And what you'll do is you'll go into that folder and you can just run the Blender executable from right there. So you don't actually have to install Blender. And that will allow it to work on your devices, right? Because usually we don't have administrator privileges to install software. So Blender, you should be able to get working even without administrator privileges, right? So that's going to be one of those things where definitely use Blender Portable, extract the zip file to its own folder on your desktop, wherever you can put it. And then you'll go into that folder that's has all the extraction data, and you'll just run Blender right from there. So you don't install Blender because it'll kind of give you like a prompt like, oh, you don't have administrative privileges. But the nice thing with Blender Portable is you can actually run it like right from the extracted folder without installing it. Blender is also free, so it's much like Maya and Mudbox. It's fully free, but also at the same time it's free, just free, right? You get a free education version of Maya and Mudbox. Blender is fully free, so even if you wanted to do professional work that you got paid for, you could use Blender for that. Blender's a lot smaller download, and it's super painless, right? So we're going to work with Blender. Like I said, I've already got it up and running on my Surface Pro, so you guys should be able to get it working on lower end computers that Maya and Mudbox couldn't work on, and even on your devices. So if for whatever reason you have no access to any computer except for your Surface Pro or the device Lathrop gives you, it should be able to run on that. So we're going to be using Blender. That doesn't mean I'm going to go through and show you Blender. We're going to kind of ease ourselves in on the first week or two with this project because we don't know Blender yet, right? So when you run Blender, you'll see it comes up to here, and you'll see some kind of prompt screen like this when it first opens up. Now in this case, this is on my PC, and I've already kind of told it to do what I want to do, but there will be kind of like a little option somewhere around here that'll say Blender. It's a little pull down. If you click on that, you'll see there's an option that says like something like industry standard. Switch to that, right? If for whatever reason you don't have that, right? Like you kind of accidentally just clicked on it and did this and it drops out. One of the things you can do is you can go to edit, preferences, right? So you can go to the edit menu, preferences, and in preferences, what you'll see is there should be kind of a, I'm trying to remember where it's at. It's somewhere in here. Just got to remember to find it. And right now, Blender is slowing down for me. There we go. It's going to be in one of these. I remember seeing it somewhere. Let me just run through here really quick. Don't slow down so much. All right. There we go. Key map, right? So kind of when the preferences come up, if you go to the key map section, you'll see at the very top, is industry compatible, but you see how there's Blender the 2.7 series, and then there's industry compatible. So once again, if you're kind of in that position where you come in and you forgot to turn on industry compatible when the splash screen first shows up for Blender, you can always go to Edit, Preferences, click on the key map section, and change it right here. Now what's cool about industry compatible is that it sets up your navigation to be just like Maya. So if you hold down Alt left mouse button, it'll rotate. Alt middle mouse button will move. Alt right mouse button will zoom. W, E, and R work for move, rotate, and scale, right? So you kind of have all of those. Even double clicking on edges will work, and left click works. Now you might see that your zoom kind of goes more vertical than horizontal. If you want, you can go into Edit, Preferences, and that's another one of those things where you can go to, I remember where that's at too, Navigation right here, and you can tell the zoom axis to be horizontal, which is more like Maya, where you kind of Alt right mouse drag left to right horizontally instead of vertically. So you can even change that if you want to, right? So there are a couple of other preferences in here if you want to kind of adjust those. You should be downloading the Blender 2.8, but any of the 2.8 series and above is going to kind of be easy to set up as industry standard. All right, so having said that, let's go over some of the basics of the interface, right? So of course we can see that there's File here. This is where you can open stuff, save things, right? So you can totally save your stuff. Import and export, you'll see this kind of supports a lot of the standard formats, so you can get stuff in and out of Blender from other software, right? But File kind of is what you'd expect it to be. Edit menu, you'll see undo and redo are there with the same kind of quick keys that we would have in Maya. That's of course where preferences are at. You'll notice there's not as many things up here. We have like the render section, we'll be going over rendering later on. Window, right? You can kind of go in and do some other stuff in there if you need to. And there's even help stuff right here. The next thing you'll see is there's layout, right? And then there's modeling, which will kind of focus the interface a little more on modeling. So these are kind of like Maya's workspaces, right? UV editing, it has its own UV editing workspace, right? Texture paint, and stuff like that. So we'll actually be kind of exploring these a little more as we go on. I'll probably switch to modeling just because we're going to do some modeling eventually. Once you have modeling on, though, you'll see that you have kind of your main selection tool here. You'll notice that there's modes, right? So you can actually kind of switch this, some of this different kind of selection modes right here, right? And even further down, you'll see that there's this edit mode section, right? And if you click on that little pull down, you'll see object mode. There's a quick key for that 4. Edit mode is kind of your standard, being able to edit kind of your different selection types. Sculpt mode is 5, so texture paint's 8. And that'll kind of set these to be a little bit different. But you'll also notice right here that we have vertex, edge, and face. And in fact, you'll notice kind of by default, edit mode is in vertex selection, right? So that's 1, right? 2 will actually set you to edge mode, and 3 will actually set you to face mode, right? So you can actually use quick keys 1, 2, and 3 to kind of switch you between those. 4 will go back out to object level, all right? So 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of give you your main vertex, edge, face, object mode selection types. So it's kind of good to know about those things. You'll see right here, there's kind of some major tools right down the side here. Like you'll see there's move, rotate, and scale. You'll see there's kind of a cursor stuff. Selection box, if we click on that, you'll see that there is, come on, there we go. If we left click on it, right, you'll see that there is a tweak mode. There is circle select, which is actually drag select, right? And one of the things you'll notice is that when you actually turn a tool on, if you were to say right click on a tool, right, you can actually change the shortcut, right? So you can remove a shortcut, you can change it. That way you can kind of add some of your own quick keyboard shortcuts, right? But if you hold down left mouse button on this, you can switch between the different selection types, right? Select is kind of more like our standard selection box. Left click drag, circle is kind of more of like our drag select, right? And like I said, if you right click on it, you can actually add a shortcut, right? So you can add some of your own shortcuts, which is cool. So you'll have things like drag select and regular marquee select. There's even a tweak tool. So the nice thing is that kind of gets us up and running a little bit with the basics of how Blender is going to work, right? And it's kind of the interface, right? You'll also see right down here that you'll have, like we said, there's a couple of different selection options here. You can adjust the radius size, right, for kind of your drag select if you wanted to. You'll see right here there's view, and you can kind of, there's frame selected and frame all, using the same quickies that Maya does, right? So F and A. If you go to select menu, you'll see that you have things like select all, invert selection, box and circle, of course, just like from here. And we'll kind of talk about some more of these as well. Select more and less, right? So up and down arrow will actually grow your selections, right? Add kind of has the ability to drop primitives in. Mesh has some of your transform tools, mirror tools, snap, copying, extrude is in there, split. So we'll actually see that a lot of the standard tools that we use are in here, right? And then you see there's vertex specific stuff, edge specific stuff, face specific stuff, right? So if I'm a little bit kind of more finding stuff in here, remember it's because I'm solid with Blender. I know what I'm doing in Blender generally, but you know, I don't use Blender as nearly as much as I use Maya, right? I've been teaching Maya forever. I use Modo at home, but you know, what we have is what we can get working seems to be Blender, and in its current state with the 2.8 series, it's pretty darn cool. So forgive me if I occasionally fumble around a little bit when we're doing stuff. It's just, you know, still getting to know Blender better, right? So keep that in mind as we work with some of these videos. So kind of like you have a lot of your tools here as well, right? So there's bevel, there's extrude, right? Loop cut. You have a lot of the stuff in here and a lot of the stuff right here, particularly when you're modeling. So I would definitely take advantage of kind of the layout stuff up here. It's kind of neat, like sculpting. We're going to do some sculpting here for high resolution stuff. So take advantage of these. Just like Maya and Modo have their own like little kind of workspaces, Blender does nowadays. In fact, they copied more of the Modo model. This is actually much more the way Modo's kind of workspaces look than Maya's, but it's the same principle. All right. Of course, over here we actually see that we have kind of very similar to Maya's outliner, right? So this is basically your scene, and there's your camera, there's your object, there's your light, right? And you'll see that you can turn the eyeballs off of them, right? So if you don't want your camera visible or your light visible, you can do that. If there's any objects grouped in other objects, you can kind of open them up. But basically, you'll see that you can actually select objects in here if you need to, right? This is more of like your properties section, right? Like right now there's no modifiers, and we'll see we don't have to worry nearly as much about history in Blender as we would in Maya, which can kind of get a little annoying in Maya. But this is kind of where a lot of your properties are, and you'll see that there's kind of the circle select properties, because that's what we currently have active. Like if we turn our move tool on, you'll see that here's some of the move options as well. So this is kind of basically your tool properties, right? Tool settings. This is some of the rendering properties, technically some dimensions for final renders. If you want to do rendering passes, a lot of these things we're not even going to get to use, right? We wouldn't normally do it in our class anyways. You can add modifiers, which is kind of Blender's version of procedural modeling. We'll use a couple of those as we go along. Cube properties. So keep in mind that, you know, you kind of have like your properties areas right here. All right. So basically just kind of really kind of getting you guys to see some of the basics of the Blender interface and how that works, right? And as we go along, we'll do some more stuff. Like, you know, you can have, you know, multiple layers for rendering, multiple scene options. Like I said, you know, I'm not full expert at Blender, so there might be a few areas where I'm still kind of getting better with it. But in general, I know it well enough that we'll be able to use it effectively to do primarily what we wanted to this term. I just wanted to do a great little kind of introduction to Blender, kind of letting you guys know, hey, edit preferences. You know, if you go to key map, you can turn industry compatible on, and that's really going to allow you to kind of use this more like normal. Like I said before, one of the cool things is we can hit 2 to go to edge mode. And one of the neat things is if you right click, right, you'll actually see that it brings up a context sensitive menu with all the tools you can use while you're in edge mode, right? So you see we can actually, so instead of always having to go to these menus here, you just right click over the object and you'll have the ability to bevel edges you have selected. You'll be able to extrude edges if you want to. Loop, cut, and slide, right? So we activate that and you see how we can kind of interactively click in here, right? And it automatically snaps to the middle, so if you just click, it'll put it in there. But if you click, if you like loop, clip, slide again, and you left click and you hold, it'll allow you to interactively put it somewhere, right? And so we see we can put edge loops in there. Now, one of the cool things is by turning industry compatible on, if you double click on an edge, it selects an edge loop, right? So just like Maya, if you double click on an edge, it'll select an edge loop. And that way we can kind of go in here and you see W for move, right? So we can just kind of grab the handle, move it up, grab the handle, move it over. And you'll see these manipulators look very much like Maya's. So if you grab on that little square, it'll kind of move both. Now, technically, Maya can do this also, what I'm about to show you, because there is kind of the free move in the center here, right? So that's just view move, and we're using this more on our troll, just like a lot of you guys that were here for the crab, we did that, right? But one of the cool things, and Maya technically can do it, Maya does it based on the last selected manipulator, whereas the way Blender does it, I actually kind of like better. Blender automatically has a quick key for a middle mouse button that just does free move, right? It just automatically does your view move. So it won't use the last selected handle, it just does view move. So that's actually be really, really cool as we do this character stuff some more. And you see we hit E for rotate, and of course we have our specific rotate handles. But like I said, if you do middle mouse button, you see how it does view rotate automatically for you. That's kind of cool. If we hit R for scale, you'll see that there's kind of our normal scale handles, right? So we can just kind of scale those out. But once again, middle mouse button will kind of do a uniform scale. So the middle mouse button in itself, when you hold it down, actually just kind of does the view move, the view rotate, and the uniform scale. Well, it scales all three at the same time. It doesn't actually use the last selected handle. That's the way Maya does it, which is cool, but I actually kind of prefer the Blender way a little bit more. It makes doing the view stuff quite easy, believe it or not. And of course, if we hit 3, we can go to faces, and we can do this all the faces as well, right? So you see how kind of this middle mouse button to kind of uniform scale. So you'll notice that one of the cool things about us kind of doing this, and remember it's W, E, and R, just like it normally is, but they are right here when you're in the modeling layout, that at the end of the day, you know, it's not radically different than Maya, right? It's a little bit different, right? It's going to have some of its own little interface-specific things, but the basics transcend, right? One is vertices, so I can go to vertices and I just free move that down, right? The fundamentals work the same in all software. So, you know, we're teaching you Maya because Maya is widely used in the industry. But whatever you learn in Maya, it's going to translate over here. Sneak peek, we're going to do a lot of extruding to build our troll, right? So I just want to kind of get you guys a cool little introduction to Blender video to point out a few things before we actually start to model something. So that should be a great place to stop.